Hi, I'm Venus O'Hara and welcome to another video of Vlogmas. And today I wanted to talk to you about my podcast in case you haven't listened to it. I want to promote it a little bit because I haven't been promoting it as much as I should have. It's called the Orgasmic Lifestyle Podcast and I started it in August 2021. And the idea behind it was quite simple really. I wanted to share a bit more about my lifestyle, which I consider to be orgasmic, not just because I'm a sex toy reviewer or that I like a lot of orgasms like many people perhaps, but actually I was inspired to start this podcast because I have a lot of things in my lifestyle I consider to be orgasmic. By orgasmic, I mean kind of reaching the climax in different areas of life. And the inspiration came from a Brazilian journalist, actually, who interviewed me for Marie Claire Brazil. And I remember she was going to be late to our interview. We were going to have an interview on Skype. And then she was panicking, sending me messages saying, I'm in traffic. Can we postpone half an hour? I was like, yeah, sure. I was really, really chilled about it. And then when we actually got to speak, I told her that I'd had no alarm for the last, since 2009. This was a few years ago now. And that was the detail of our conversation that really stayed in her mind the most, or that impressed her the most. And I realized, wow, I need to share a bit more than just sexuality. So I had this idea going around in my head for a while to have this kind of lifestyle thing. I started using the hashtag my orgasmic lifestyle on Instagram, and I was sharing things about my nutrition and just different lifestyle tips and going to the gym, waking up with no alarm and things like that. And when I had the opportunity to actually start a podcast, someone interviewed me for a podcast, then we started talking about microphones, and then all of a sudden this person introduced me to their podcast producer, and I thought, yes, I'm going to do it. Because before that point, I wasn't really open to the idea of learning a whole new skill set. For example, learning how to edit audio and how to actually publish a podcast. It just seemed like a lot of work for me. I just wanted to focus on maybe making content. I didn't really know how to go about it. So when I discovered this podcast production company, it just made things so much easier for me. And they were finding interviewees for me. And I created this format, which I'm still using to this day, which I really like because it's kind of like my dream magazine. It has everything that I'm interested in. For example, books, spirituality, health, sexuality, sacred sexuality, and meditation. So every episode I started off doing interviews every single episode. I have a lunar schedule, so I publish on full moon and new moon, and at the actual time of the full moon and new moon in Barcelona. So it's every couple of weeks, and there's going to be a full moon this week on the 8th of December, so that's when I'll be doing my next episode, which is going to be all about fantasy, sexual fantasy, and how we can explore that a little bit more. So I was doing lots of interviews, and the people I've interviewed have been experts in, let's say, sexuality, spirituality, sobriety, vegan nutrition, vegan bodybuilding, and seduction. Many of them have been actually New York Times best-selling authors. That's a huge privilege to actually interview these people. And I have I have a shelf on my bookshelves that is just for my podcast guests' books, which is really cool. So I've had this amazing opportunity or privilege to actually read someone's book and then interview them shortly after, which has been amazing. So I love reading, and I always feel that I'm quite connected to a book when I read them, and then to actually have the privilege of speaking to the author as well is just amazing. And it means that I enjoy the book a lot more, and I can ask certain questions that are related to their books, because I'm aware that oftentimes when someone does an interview, let's say an author does an interview, the interviewer has not always read the book. It does take time and effort to actually read a whole book. And so anyway, earlier this year, I decided to do less interviews, and also, so I think it's full moon, instead of an interview, I share one of my erotic stories, because I'm also getting into voice acting. So it's a great practice for me to actually narrate one of my stories, because I have many, many stories to share. They're all true and they're very hot. And so in my format, I have a monologue, story or interview, a book review, And then it ends with some affirmations, meditation. So it could be sometimes, more often than not, it's related to sexuality. For example, one of the first ones I did was clitoral gratitude affirmations, which is just fantastic. So I think on any meditation app, you'll always find the same topics, such as self-love, abundance, money, things like that, or health. Whereas I wanted to create some meditations that you're not going to find everywhere, such as sexual wellness, I'm an orgasmic woman, things like that. So that's what I've done on my podcast. And also I've done some BDSM affirmations and polyamorous open relationship affirmations. And I've also discovered some topics that I personally do not practice. I think it's really important in life to have an open mind towards different topics that you might not think are for you. And examples of those would be, I interviewed a polyamory coach, which I am so not into polyamory or open relationships, but I still think it's interesting to explore these topics with an expert. And yes, it's very interesting to open your mind. And I would be open to actually interviewing a carnivore. I'm a real vegan and stuff, but I do think it's interesting to challenge your beliefs and listen to someone or interview someone who has the complete opposite view that you do on any life, on any topic in life. So yes, that's the format. That's the why I started the podcast and the scheduling. And I was just making this podcast, I saw full moons coming, or new moon, I need to make the next episode. Then I would share it on my social media, maybe not as much as I should do. But then I checked the stats just quite recently, and I was completely shocked and surprised to see how many listeners that I had, and it's doing really, really well on a global scale. Just in the last week, I was number 1 in Malta in the sexuality charts. Now I'm number 3 in Egypt, and I've been doing quite well in lots of different countries in the sexuality chart of Apple Podcasts, and also Spotify has been doing really well as well. So it's kind of been growing orgasmically, organically, and I'm so happy to see that happening. And also a lot of people, I wanted to share this video because a lot of people were not aware that I had a podcast, because lots of people have been very complimentary about my calming voice. So if you'd like to listen to a bit more of my calming voice, then definitely check out my podcast, the Orgasmic Lifestyle Podcast by Venus O'Hara, on any podcast platform. And that's it for today's Vlogmas. I can smell my vegan pizza in the oven now, so I better go and eat that and enjoy my podcast. If you have any suggestions for my next Vlogmas videos, don't hesitate to write to me at venusohara.org, and I'll be back tomorrow for some more Vlogmas. See you then.